Hello, my name is Mike, and today we're building a uJove. This was not available as a kit, so I purchased the panel and PCB and sourced my own parts for it. As always, this video is not sponsored. I bought everything with my own money, and the background music to this video was made featuring the uJove. I bought the PCB and panel combo from a store in the UK for about $24, but I'm in the US, so shipping was $31.69. That store didn't have all the pots and knobs I needed, and the only single store that had all of them was Thonk in the UK, so I ended up ordering the pots and knobs, including a few extra ones from there, for about $17, but then shipping was another $17.73 on top of that. The electrical components needed for the build were ordered in the US and cost $66.60 altogether, plus $7.99 shipping, but I ordered these components at the same time as my NLC product wavefolder components, so I'm splitting that shipping in half down to just $4. So in all, the cost of the materials without shipping came out to about $108, which wouldn't be bad. But when you factor in all the shipping cost, it was more like $161. Ouch! And this was all ordered back in January of 2025 before any new dumb tariffs were introduced in the US. Meanwhile, a regular Jove retails for about $250, so we're still saving a fair bit of money at least. So let's get started. Right off the bat, I'm already making a mistake. I'm installing a CD4027 chip at U4, which should be a CD4052 chip. I didn't realize I had two chips that begin with CD40, so I basically grabbed the first one I saw. I'm using a fine point cone-shaped tip at 400 degrees Celsius. I'm not comfortable going higher than that, but I'm still having a hard time getting this tip to melt the solder. Eventually I give up and go back to a chisel tip, and I lower the temperature to 350 degrees Celsius. This works much better. If you use a cone-shaped tip, let me know what temperature you usually set it to in the comments below. In hindsight, I probably should have gotten a bevel-shaped tip instead of the fine point cone-shaped one. I've been watching more and more soldering videos on YouTube, and it seems like the bevel-shaped tips are preferred for SMD. This is the point where I realized that I soldered the wrong IC in the space for U4, so it's time to bust out the hot air reflow station and pull this chip. Nothing quite like reflowing the very first component on a project. Here's the wrong IC I put in U4. I'm marking it for U3, which is where this type of IC goes. Here is the correct IC for U4, so let's try this again, this time with the correct IC. Initially, I try reusing the solder that's already on the pads, but that ends up not working because I can't get the IC to lie down flat enough due to the raised solder. I end up having to wick the excess solder up. Here I'm getting a fresh new IC for U3. I'm not even going to try reusing the one I already accidentally used for U4. I tend to order most of these components in multiples of 10, so I have plenty of spares. Sometimes these components cost the same for one item as they do for 10 of them, or it's close enough that it just makes sense to get 10 and have extras. Now I'm continuing on with the rest of the ICs. Throughout this video, you'll notice I'm transferring solder from the tip of my soldering iron to the PCB pads and components. This is not my preferred way of doing it, but these components are so small that I'm not able to use my 0.8mm solder wire without making a huge mess. I've made a mess of a solder bridge here. I'm not able to resolve it with just the iron, so I bring out the desoldering wick. My desoldering wick technique is all wrong, and a few weeks after I did this, a really good video on desoldering came out from a channel called NanoFix that I'll link below. Watching that video made me realize that I have no idea what I'm doing when it comes to wicking, and it explains why I keep getting my wick stuck to the PCB. Long story short, I should be cutting pieces of wick off the roll instead of keeping them attached. When I keep it on the roll, the heat is dissipating away from where I'm working and up the roll, lowering the temperature where I need it to be hot. Also, I tend to not have enough solder on the tip of my iron. Basically, every time I touch the wick with my iron, the solder on it is getting sucked into the wick, so I need to re-wet my iron with fresh solder every time it touches the wick. Here I'm showing that the IC I have for Q1 and Q2 is labeled BC857BS. I copy-pasted this Mouser reference number directly from the BOM. However, the BOM also says that the part is BCM857BS. I wasn't sure if these were interchangeable, so I wanted to document this in case there was a typo and anything went wrong. The module works and everything seems fine. The difference between the two components is the BCM version is a matched double transistor and the BC version is not matched. I'm not sure what this means, but in this case it doesn't seem like anything to worry about. This component is so tiny I was having trouble getting it in place. Orientation matters for these diodes. The line printed on the diode must be on the same side as the line with the arrow pointing to it printed on the PCB. The flux on this diode is making it hard to see the line, so I'm bringing a light closer to help me see. These LM13700s are the last of the ICs. They're so close to the edge of the PCB and so much larger than the other ICs that it feels much easier to do these than the previous components. Now we're moving on to the 0603 sized resistors and capacitors. 0603 components are a bit more challenging than the slightly larger 0805 ones. R22 here is an 0805 sized thermal resistor or thermistor. Its resistance value changes based on its temperature. These are three-legged transistors. It made sense to do the resistors and capacitors around them first, and I hold off on doing Q6 until later. I accidentally got solder in a through hole here. Luckily, I was able to successfully wick it out with minimal fuss. Now we're adding the trimmers that allow us to tune the filter frequency and resonance. These trimmers need a very small Phillips head screwdriver when you calibrate them. Next, we're flipping over to the front side of the PCB. There are SMD components that need to go here. First, we'll do this diode. The line on each diode must be oriented in the same direction that the arrow printed on the PCB is pointing. Now we're doing the electrolytic capacitors. SMD electrolytic capacitors are always a bit tricky. You need to tin one of the pads with solder, place the capacitor, melt the solder while pushing down on the capacitor, and then go back and solder the other side. Luckily, there's plenty of room on this board, so it's not bad at all. Now that the electrolytic capacitors are done, we'll add this second diode here. Next up are the through-hole film capacitors. Film capacitors are considered high quality and are often used in audio circuits. Sometimes there are mods where you can upgrade a guitar pedal simply by switching out certain capacitors with higher quality film capacitors. I'm very concerned about how close this through hole is to the pad on R64, so I keep futzing with it to make sure there isn't a bridge. P1 and P2 are fuses. I assume that if there were an electrical fault, these fuses would burn out, saving the rest of the components on the board. Now we're moving on to the front panel hardware. We're going to place the components but not solder them yet. I'm starting off with the switch that controls the 4 filter modes. Here I'm showing that these potentiometers do not have the little metal nub that needs to be clipped off like in some of my other videos. Now I'm placing the mini jacks. The flat side of the LED must match the flat side of the diagram on the PCB. The through holes for this LED are tiny. I wish they were slightly larger and a bit more spaced out. Now we're placing the front panel and screwing in the nuts. When the nuts are properly tightened, the front panel components will be at the proper height for soldering. I'm soldering the 4 legs of the LED first so I can trim them and get them out of the way. The holes are so close together it makes sense to trim off each leg as I solder it to give myself more room to solder each remaining leg. Next, I will solder the switch, pots, and mini jacks. When it comes to the pots, I'm only soldering the small pins. I'm leaving the larger location lugs for later. Now I'm adding the surface mount power pin header. I had a hard time with this, and I definitely prefer through-hole power pins. Finally, I'm testing the continuity to make sure there are no shorts before I test the module. Alright, here's the uJove. We're going to power it on. Hope nothing explodes. No light. No smoke. Yeah, I'm going to assume this ain't working. Fudge. Oh, hello. Okay. Problems. So my first instinct is to reflow a bunch of connections, starting with the LED pins. However, I'm wasting my time here. For the sound, I just need to calibrate the frequency and resonance using the trimmers at TR1 and TR2. I end up doing that after this. As for the LED, more on that in a moment. Alright, so this is working except for the LED light. Now I tuned the trimmers for the resonance and frequency just by ear. I didn't use an oscilloscope or anything. But it sounds really good. Press the button, get different filter modes. This is band pass, high pass, 24 low pass. Let's get some extra distortion. So it's a uJove. It sounds great. The only thing I'm missing is the LED, and I just figured out why. This is a common anode LED. I need a common cathode LED. I didn't understand the difference when I placed my order. What did I order? I ordered 2 common anode LEDs. That's not working. That's why this doesn't light up. So I am getting a 100 pack on Amazon of the common cathode LEDs, which is what I need. So once I get those, take this out, put that in, I should have a 100% working uJove. Look what we have today. I only need one of these, but I got 100. I think I paid over $1 each for the two I ordered from Mouser. One backup one, that's the second one. And I got this, plus a bunch of useless through-hole resistors for like $9. So I'm all for quality electrical components, but somehow I doubt there's a huge difference between these LEDs and the one I ordered from Mouser. Now comes the part where I have to desolder and remove the wrong LED, and once again my wicking techniques are not great. I end up resorting to using the hot air reflow station to pull this out. As you can see, I somehow managed to gouge out some of the protective solder mask right here. I left it, and so far it doesn't seem to be a problem. Now I'm soldering the correct LED. Here I'm soldering the large location lugs for the potentiometers. I like to do these last after I know the module is working properly, because once they're in place, it's really difficult to desolder them in case they need to be swapped out or removed to get at something underneath them. Now I'm putting the front panel back on. This time we're adding the knobs. And here is the uJove. Alright, here we go. Fully working uJove. Light. Sound. Resonance. Different modes. Distortion. Hooray! Thank you so much for watching this build video. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, please consider liking and subscribing. Have a great day.